everybody, what is up? My name is Mackenzie.
And I'm Jonathan.
We are husband and wife, and together we are TerreDice Games.
And today we're here with a very special guest, Jamey Stegmaier of Stonemaier Games. So why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here today. As you mentioned, I run Stonemaier Games. I design some of our games like Scythe and Charterstone and Viticulture, and I also help develop some of the other games that we publish like Wingspan and Pendulum and Between Two Cities, Between Two Castles and My Little Scythe. And I also I run a YouTube channel where I talk a lot about game design, and that's why I'm really excited to talk with you today about a very specific element of game design and games that we both play.
Awesome, great, yeah. So that was what was funny. We've been posting a couple videos recently, and we were totally in sync a couple different weeks. But most recently, we were talking about popular IP and board games and how that kind of plays in. So we thought that was funny. Got talking and decided we'd kind of talk at the same time. So
yeah.
So here we are. Cool. Well, today the topic is hidden goals, global goals. It's really like with hidden goals, it's usually your individual goal that gets revealed in the scoring phase typically, but can tilt how the scoring comes out. And then there's the global goals, which kind of incentivize the competition and getting players to like go for those limited bonus points. So really just talking about how that kind of inner experiences has influenced how games are played.
Yeah. Do you want to start out with an example of maybe a hidden goal, and we can talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, sure.
Maybe let's dive in with you. Like, what do you have on your list?
Yeah, so just this past weekend, I was playing a game called Via Nebula, and it got me thinking about this topic again, even though I'd already started to make my list. Via Nebula is essentially an order fulfillment game. Have you guys played Via Nebula?
No, I haven't heard of it.
It's like a basic version of Brass by the same designer as Brass. And as I was playing it, I realized that one little kind of nitpick that I have about hidden goal games is that if my cards are face down on the table that have the goals, I often kind of forget that I have those goals. I forget to see them. And so I often end up flipping those cards up on the table, and they're not hidden anymore. They're just personal goals. And so it made me think that there are certain games, and one of them on my list is Sagrada, that actually gives me a reason to hide the goal. Have you guys played Sagrada?
No, I haven't played that one.
You haven't played it? So it's a very basic dice drafting game. And each player in the core game has a very basic goal, which just says at the end of the game, you get some points based on a specific color of die. So if I have the purple goal, I'll get points for every purple die that I have that I have accumulated during the game that I put into my little stained glass window. And this is an example where, because it's a dice drafting game, it actually matters. I don't want other players to see that goal, because if they do, they might be a little incentivized to take the high numbered purple dice so that I don't get the maximum points from those dice. So I was trying to think along those lines. I have some other examples that I'll share, but along those lines where it really makes sense to keep that private goal hidden so that other players don't see it, opposed to some of those games where it doesn't really matter. You could put it face up on the table and it doesn't impact all that much.
Yeah, and that was where we'd actually been talking about, there's something that's not quite a hidden goal, but it's something that you tend to hide towards the end of the game, and that's in Everdell. Yeah. You have like these cards, so the prosperity cards. The thing with those that I was thinking felt more like a hidden goal is like, they don't really get you much during the game, so it's something that you tend to play towards the end. But usually it involves like getting a certain number of basic events or like getting a certain number of these other types of cards. And if you know that the other player has those prosperity cards in their village, like you're probably going to go for them to stop them from getting those. So kind of a similar element of like whether you reveal that or not.
Yeah, and we were actually discussing whether you classified this part in Everdell as a hidden goal, because I kind of thought of it just as a strategy, but John thought it was more of like as a hidden goal. So I don't know, just how different parts of different games people could see differently. So I don't know what like the
and refresh my memory on that.
Yeah.
When do you actually obtain those goals in that game? Do you just get them at the beginning, or do you gather them at some point during the game?
So Everdell has a couple different things. So it has the global goals, which is like the basic events and the special events and all that. But then the prosperity cards, those kind of pop up whenever. There are some special ones that you can get as part of like the extra decks and the legends. The legends is the expansion. Where they just give every player one card, so you have it hidden from the beginning of the game. So that's where that one felt more like a goal. But yeah, those are cards that you can just pick up throughout the game. But if players aren't paying attention, you play it at the end, and you got a ton of bonus points. So.
Okay. I think we both had Wingspan on our list. I don't want to focus too much on Stonemaier games, but Wingspan
is great.
Well, I feel like Wingspan is the perfect example of game goals versus like hidden goals. And so what we want to talk about Wingspan. So were you involved with the playtest at all when you were working with Wingspan?
Oh yeah.
So
Elizabeth Hargrave is the design. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, so when you guys were playtesting Wingspan, was it always hidden and game goals, or is that something that you developed over time to have both?
Yeah, we're talking like these ones where you have like the competitive or friendly, and then having both these ones as well.
Yeah. I guess we've I accidentally went into a different category here, a category of games that have both hidden goals and global goals, but that's fine. It's been a while since we designed, or since I helped develop and Elizabeth designed that aspect of Wingspan. So I'm trying to remember. I think the private goals, the bonus cards, were there fairly early on, but I think we were looking for more ways for players to pay attention to each other. And with hidden goals, in some games you're kind of guessing what other players are going after, but it's, you're using most of your brain power focused on your own goals, not on what other goals other players might have. But with the common goals, when you have shared public goals, that is a reason to actively pay attention to other players, especially if you're vying for more of one thing than other players. And so I think we did add that sometime during the development playtesting process, because we wanted more reasons for players to pay attention to each other.
Yeah, that was a really cool one for me, I think, because it's really cool how there's two different sides to it. There's sort of the idea that it's the first player to get something versus, every player who gets this many will get this many points. It can kind of allow you to play it both ways if you have players who don't like the competitiveness or really do like that in that sense. But yeah, I thought that was pretty cool. There was another one that was, so another example of like a hidden goal was like Tiny Epic Galaxies. This is one where I basically you've got like the hidden goals that each player has. And the thing with the secret mission was that it really only comes into play if multiple players reach the 21 points at the same time. So you're trying to get 21 points in the game. So it's like when a player hits it, then it goes one more round around. And if somebody else gets to 21, then it's really like, that can really like tip it there. But I feel like that's a mechanic I've seen. So with that one, you draw 2 cards and then you get to pick one as your like goal. I feel like that's been a more reoccurring theme that a lot of people are using, like the draw 2, pick one. In Gloomhaven, you also have like your scenario goal. And so that was another one where I thought like sort of handled the same way.
Yeah, let's come back to Gloomhaven in a second, because that's an interesting one. We've been talking about competitive games, and that's a cooperative one. I want to hear your thoughts on that. But with competitive games, I think one of the hidden goals are an asset to some competitive games where it gives players maybe a little bit of hope through uncertainty, where if you look at the victory point track and you think, okay, I am 20 points behind the leader, I don't have a chance here. If there's no endgame scoring, no hidden endgame scoring, you might just, I don't know. I typically try to play through games anyway. I'm not necessarily playing to win, just playing to have fun. But I can see how that might be disheartening for some players. But if you had that hidden goal, like in Lords of Waterdeep, each player has a hidden goal, then you can kind of look forward to a big points burst at the end of the game, and it can give you hope compared to the current state of the game. So I think that can be an asset as well.
Yeah,
and I think definitely like into that hope, like noticing you're really behind, be like, oh, I have this secret thing that you don't know about, and I feel, that can keep a player in the game where they might just be like, I don't know, I'm too far behind, I'm never coming back.
Right.
And I guess, have you played Tiny Epic Galaxies before?
I've only played it once. It's been a couple years. Yeah.
That was the only one where it was like, I feel like it was kind of added in I don't know if it was added in last minute, but it like the points were so marginal that sometimes I forgot about it. And sometimes with games, the hidden goals and the game goals can kind of change my entire strategy toward the game because I want to achieve those. But in that game in particular, I kind of just forgot about them. But.
Yeah, I think an example of that was with Call to Adventure. So like Call to Adventure, you're given a third act card, which is like what you end up being, like One with Nature, Master of Whispers, Heir to the Throne. And it's like, I felt really incentivized to follow my story. It's like, if I'm going to be the heir to the throne, I have to like do stuff that'll get me there. So got to go be friends with the queen.
Right. Well, and that's an interesting balance there too, because if you don't have enough points or enough mechanical meaning behind it, you might forget about it. Like you said, Mackenzie, you might just forget about it. It's not meaningful. On the flip side, if it's worth too much, it might drive your strategy to the point where you don't feel like you're making the choices so much as the game has told you what you need to do, and then you have to do that thing.
Sure.
That was another thing that we really tried to balance with Wingspan, where we try to make it enough points that it feels important, but not so much that if you end up needing to ignore it or wanting to ignore it and just following your own path based on the birds you get and other stuff, that you can still feel good about doing that as well. I think that's a tough balance to hit.
Yeah, I definitely think that is like a hard balance, because with Call to Adventure, I definitely feel like that is like what drives you to make choices.
Yeah.
But in Wingspan too, like sometimes I felt like I didn't know what path I wanted to take, and I felt like the hidden goals kind of guided me into where I wanted to play my points, but I didn't feel totally like I had to follow it. But yeah. We're actually talking about one point about how hidden goals can actually kind of come back and bite you in the butt, because I want to achieve it so much that we were actually, we were playing Terraforming Mars this weekend, and I was winning, but I needed to go one more round to get this card to complete this. It was actually a game goal.
Oh yeah, that was
It was an open goal. And so we went the extra round, and I ended up losing horribly because like he then was able to achieve all this stuff. So I feel like that's a different interesting aspect of those like secondary, besides like the number of points, but the global goals and hidden goals, how it can really change someone's strategy.
I totally agree with that. I've actually heard that criticism about Scythe, one of my games, a little bit, because the objectives are designed to make you do different things than you would normally do. But some of them might take you so far from the path of a winning strategy, like you just described, that it's no longer worth it at a certain point to pursue it. So, and that can be frustrating to players sometimes, because they have this goal. It's very satisfying to complete that goal, and maybe less satisfying to just ignore it, especially if it's a big, powerful, special feeling goal.
You mentioned, so we were talking about Gloomhaven for a second, and that was one of those where like it really throws us off. So I thought it was kind of funny thinking about the scenario goals. What it does for the game is I think it characterizes your character with a bit of unpredictability. So it's like you wouldn't normally be the person to like charge in the door and like do the thing. But if your card says if you do it, you like get some points, you're like, or a check mark, you're going to do it. So I feel like that was something that added unpredictability to the game that made it kind of exciting.
I like that. And it also adds the twist in Gloomhaven of it eliminates alpha player and quarterbacking a little bit, because if you do have someone at the table that is kind of telling everybody else what to do, but you have your own little hidden goal, like who cares what they're telling you what to do? You're going to go after that treasure or that loot because your card tells you to do that. I like that it adds that little zest to the game.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Cool.
Any other examples of cooperative games? I didn't think of many cooperative games for this list where you have hidden goals, global goals probably, but not hidden goals.
So that was the big cooperative game that we thought of. You also mentioned one other point that I thought was really interesting. It was how you felt like if things were hidden from the table, it didn't discourage players who felt really behind. A game that's like built on hidden goals is Ticket to Ride. So it's like you're built on like your hidden routes. And so that's a game where like you can get really discouraged if you think someone's 75 points ahead of you. But if you don't know that they've completed 6 routes, it can make players more engaged for like the whole game, even if it doesn't end that way.
Yeah, that's a great example. Well, I'm curious what you think in Ticket to Ride, because I have internal debates about this myself. So if you don't complete a goal in Ticket to Ride, you lose those points at the end of the game. Do you think that incentive is necessary for the game? How do you feel about that?
I think so. We played it recently, like just yesterday. Actually. We were playing Ticket to Ride, and it was like 4 rounds from the end, and I picked up a new route card, and it was a 21-point destination card from like Los Angeles to New York. And I realized I needed 9 trains to complete it, and I had exactly 9 trains. I was like, I have only one way I can go here. So it was only worth the risk for the points, but like it was a lot harder decision because I could have lost 21 points.
Yeah. That's interesting. And I guess at least you had the choice to take that card, right? Don't you draw like 3 and you choose?
I could have taken an easier one that I had already completed. So it was like,
I think I think it is. I go back and forth whether it is a good thing. I think it is a good thing because it kind of makes you decide, like you have to decide, will I take both of these routes? Like, or am I just going to take one? And like, can you gamble with that? Like, because if I don't complete it, I'm going to lose all these points. And I feel like for the guy that kind of, the new player to the game that decides to take his one route at a time, he can be more competitive with maybe someone that's like, has played the game a lot.
That's a great point. Well, should we switch over maybe a little bit to global goals? I think the rest of my list are global, unless you had any other hidden goal examples, and we might come back to it too.
No, that's good.
No, yeah. Global goals.
So one that I had on my list, one of my favorite games, is Tzolk'in. You played Tzolk'in?
I haven't played it, but I've watched some videos on it, so this one's cool.
Yeah. This is a fantastic worker placement game with a really neat dial system where you're putting workers on these dials, and as time moves throughout the game, your workers get more and more powerful benefits, and you choose when to take the worker off the dial. And in this game, there's a lot of different ways to get points, but one of the ways are these monument cards that you can kind of see on the back of the board here. These monument cards, they're very difficult to get. They're very expensive, and they all 6 of them come out at the beginning of the game. So you can see these 6 goals that you could achieve if you are the first to buy them. And so I kind of like this idea. This is an interesting idea to me, where you can see all these possible goals and you can pick one to focus on, but you aren't necessarily going to be the one to get it, because you have to be the player to actually buy this goal and actually acquire it. We'll talk about Terraforming Mars in a minute, which has something a little bit similar to this. But I like this system, and it's kind of one example of global goals where it's a first to acquire, and there's a barrier to actually acquiring it. It can be good and bad, I think, because if I do focus on one of those goals and someone else happens to buy it first, that can maybe be a little disheartening. Mm-hmm. But Tzolk'in pulls it off, I think, in that all the steps that are required to get there in the first place are still good, even if I don't end up getting that specific goal. I know Terraforming Mars is fresh on your mind. Do you want to compare that a little bit to that game? How
We told you we were playing that this weekend. So the cool things about that, I think, so there was the global goals that you could sort of just like claim, but then there were also these fun awards that you could fund. So you basically are paying some credits to have an award funded so that some player will get it. And it may not necessarily be you. But what I found really interesting about that was that there was also some incentive of when you would fund an award, because it would make them more expensive as awards started getting funded. So you kind of early on have to be like, do I want to fund this award? Am I going to stay in first place for this? So I thought that was a really, really interesting mechanic, and it was fun to use that.
Yeah, I like that form of slight positive player interaction there, where someone else might fund the achievement or the reward that is going to end up benefiting you, even though they spent their credits on it.
Yeah, that one's really interesting. Definitely thought that was cool.
Yeah, I always find that a very interesting mechanic in games, like the thought of like you giving into the community of the game with hope that maybe you'll get something back. I just feel like that's a really interesting mechanic, kind of like a risk you have to take.
Yeah, and you talked about a little bit, one other thing that you said was that there can be that disappointment where like you feel like you've put a lot into an award and then you weren't the one who gets it. I feel like another place that happens I didn't think about this the first time I thought about it, but actually in Splendor, like the nobles are sort of like a global goal. So like I didn't even think about that, but that's a case where I'll get like 4, 4, and 3, and then somebody will else get all 12 and they'll like get it, and you've just like messed up your whole strategy just for that noble.
Yep. And that's a great comparison to Tzolk'in, the exact same way. So even though, if you don't get it, it is disappointing, but you still have those resources built up, and hopefully you can use most of them on another noble. So there is, I think it's like just the right amount of disappointment where you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, if you don't get a noble, it doesn't mean you're going to lose, I think.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess for you, where have you seen that global goals were like really, really integral to like how the score ended up at the end, where it like really made a big difference?
Yes, I'm glad you asked, because my next 2 examples played perfectly into that. Have you played Cartographers or Isle of Skye? Either of these games?
No, I haven't played these.
Fantastic games here, and they both use a very similar goal system where a big chunk of it ends up contributing to your final score. The system in each of these is that you, at the beginning of the game, you put out, I'll use Isle of Skye as an example. At the beginning of Isle of Skye, you put out 4 goals that are available to all players, and all players will score those goals. And every round of the game, you score typically 2 different goals, sometimes 3 of the goals. And so like in round 1, you might score goal A and C. Everyone's going to score that. And then at the end of round 2, you might score A and D. And then round 3 might be B and C and D, different combinations of these goals. And so everyone's scoring them. It contributes a ton to your scoring. And I like the huge amount of variability this provides, not only in terms of the random goals that are selected, but also the order in which they're selected. It adds a ton of replayability to every game, because even if I choose the exact same goals, but they're in a different order, because I'm scoring them in a different order, it's going to feel different than the previous game.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And Cartographers does something very similar too.
Oh, okay, very cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
I like that. You're making my wish list very long for the holidays. So.
Yeah.
A lot of these are games we've like heard of and then just haven't had a chance to play yet. There's just so much good content out there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I would say that Isle of Skye is one that I don't. So with quarantine and whatnot, I mostly play 2-player games. This is probably not the best 2-player game, but Cartographers plays great with 2 players.
Okay.
And Solkin does as well. And Sagrada, actually. We play a lot of Sagrada 2-player.
Yeah, there's
cool.
several like games on our shelves that we've gotten during this time that like you can't play them with just 2. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, or they're harder. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. There was another game you were talking about where it doesn't necessarily punish you if you like do the things that would get the goal. That made me think of like New York 1901. So you have these goals where you're trying to get like a certain number of buildings along a given street, so like Broadway or River, Thames. And that was a game where it's like, you're still building and you're still creating, and like you could have it on a corner where it's touching 2 streets. So it's like even if you don't win that street, you could still win the other street. Nice. So that was a case where it plays into it, but it's not so bad if you end up losing it. And I often would like give up on goals halfway through the game and be like, I'm not going to get that one, but you could still shift and make it useful.
Nice. I like that style. How many goals are out in every game of New York 1901?
Isn't it 3?
Yeah, there's 3 streets, and then there's also like this other global goal. So like this master architect one is like how many buildings you have of each type. So like the bronze, silver, and gold age buildings. So there's like one that's more of like the counting, like in Wingspan, how you have like different types of birds, and then one that's like just how many you have on each street or avenue. So.
Do you think there's a sweet spot to the number of global goals that are available, especially if it's variable global goals that change from game to game? Is there a number that seems too few, or a number that seems just overwhelming? You're like, why do they give me 10 different goals, or whatever that number is?
Yeah, it's a good question. I feel like what I like is usually like one more than the number of players. So it's like one player could get 2 goals and the other player gets 1 goal sort of thing. Or it's like each one's going for a single goal. That also makes me think of like racing for the factory in Scythe. So when you're like going for the factory, there's one more than there are players, which I think is nice because it gives you the ability to be like, I'm going to get first pick on what I want. But there's also sort of these other options that are left. And it still gives variability to like the last player to achieve something. Right. Yeah.
Okay, I cut you off there a little bit here.
Oh,
yeah.
No, I was just saying that's something I've been thinking about too, like how many game goals is too many. I feel like a lot of games I've seen have done 3, and I don't know. It's just a common one I see. But Terraforming Mars, I feel like did a lot.
Yeah, it had a lot on both sides of the milestones and then.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's an interesting question. Because
sometimes
they can get so muddy. There's too many things.
Right. Yeah. And that was my experience with Cooper Island the other day. Cooper Island is a fairly heavy Euro game, a little heavier than I would normally play. I played it for the first time the other day, and I think there were 8 goals out on the table, and it was just, I don't know exactly how many too many it was, but it was too many. It felt like I needed something to focus on, especially when I'm learning a game. I think, Mackenzie, you mentioned that earlier, using goals as a way to focus on something, to give you a direction when you're learning to play, and that gave me no direction at all. I needed direction there.
Yeah, and I almost felt like that in Everdell too, because there's so many game global goals that you can go to, especially when you start getting into all the expansions, and it's like a new player. I feel like it's so many things to focus on, to that I just kind of like almost with Everdell, I stopped almost focusing on them, and I'm like, I'll have enough at the end, maybe for something. Maybe something will add up for like some game goal.
Yeah. One other example I'll throw out there, because I like how this system, how this game does it. There's a game called Bruges, after the city Bruges, by Stefan Feld, I believe. And so we've talked about a few games here where if you're like the first player to claim a goal, you are the only one to claim it, you're the only one to achieve it, or other games like Cartographers, where all players are scoring these goals, or all players could score them. In Bruges, it is that second type where any player can score the goals, but they get harder every time someone scores them. It's been a while since I've actually played Bruges, so I don't know an exact example here, but if it's a goal to get like 5 red resources, and I'm the first player to get that, I pay or I have 5 red resources. That's good. I mark that. The next player who wants to get that goal, who wants to get the red resource goal, needs to have 6 of them. So I've made it a little harder for them. But if someone was going after that goal, I haven't destroyed their chance of getting it. It's just like slightly harder. I really like that system. That's one that I kind of want to implement in the game someday, because I like that I haven't ruined someone's strategy, but I've made it just a little bit harder for them.
Yeah, that's a really cool way how to do it, because you don't totally destroy it, but it's just that much more expensive. Yeah, I really like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and those players who like play it all their way down to get that goal only just have to go a little bit further to get it too.
And it kind of prevents like revenge playing, I guess. If like you're out to someone takes your game goal, then you're like, well, I'm just gonna go after you the whole game. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Revenge play is how my dad got a negative score in Ticket to Ride. So.
Oh really?
Blocking
that's
your
impressive.
Yeah. Cool. I think that was most of the ones that we wanted to talk about. I don't know if you had anything else for you as well.
I did have one other one I wanted to throw out there in case you guys have played it. Have you played Isle of Cats by any chance? I don't have it in front of me here.
I want to now. Yeah.
It's a fantastic game, and it has a draft system where you're drafting these cards throughout the game. You're passing them from player to player, and among those cards are some private goals and also some public goals. And it says so on the card. It says, this is a private goal or a public goal. And I kind of like this draft system of having these goals go around the table and having them either be public or private. So it's one of these hybrid games that has both of them, because as you select these cards, you can play them as your own goal, or if it's a public goal, you can choose to play it or even not play it, because you might draft it knowing that another player is going to benefit a lot more from this public goal that you're suddenly sharing with the whole table. So I thought that was an interesting system, using a draft to give players some control over which goals come out and to give them exposure to a lot of different goals so they can choose the ones that are best for them.
Isles of Cats?
Isle of Cats. Yeah.
Isle of Cats. Okay, we'll have to check that one out. One question I wanted to ask you, like as a designer, is there one when you're starting to design or thinking about it or even play testing, is there global goals or game goals that you tend to gravitate toward? Are you more of a hidden goal guy, or do you like global goals? Like which one do you like to work with?
Because of my play style, I often play open-handed with all my cards in games. Like in Wingspan, I play all of my bonus cards and all my bird cards are open-handed. I just like to have them open on the table for me to look at all times. So I think because of that slight bias, I don't instinctively incorporate hidden goals into my games, but I do try to put global goals in there, especially if they're the types of goals that get you to pay attention to other players. That is a little bit more my instinct, but I need to be open to both, because I love games like Isle of Cats and Lords of Waterdeep and Terraforming Mars Terraforming Mars does have some of it, but Lords of Waterdeep that have these very powerful private goals that give you that sense of direction and give you a powerful boost at the end.
So do you like the idea of like, it's kind of like a game goal in the sense that not that everyone can see it, but you're only doing your own individual goal. So everybody has their own individual goal, but everyone can still see what it is.
Like how
that
you play Wingspan. That is what I lean to.
Yeah.
Right. That like how I play Wingspan. Yeah. It's something that I'm working on a game right now. This is fresh in my mind because I'm working on a game where I'm debating how I want to incorporate that exactly into the game, because I really do like how private goals give you direction, and I want to give players a little nudge at the beginning of the game to give them something to get focused on when they're taking their first few turns. But I do like it just to be face up, which doesn't end up being all that, it's not private at all since it is face up. So I don't know. That's one way that I have to maybe put aside my gamer bias and put something a little bit more interesting into the games that I design with that hidden goal aspect.
Yeah. When there's enough stuff going on in the game too, like I'm not really paying attention to other people's goals, even if they are face up. So it can be difficult to like keep count anyway.
Yeah, I feel like you could totally do that with Wingspan, and then it wouldn't really matter to me what the other person is doing. Yeah.
Very cool. Sweet. Well, I think we're running up on time. That I think that this is a good place to conclude. So, do you have any final thoughts?
I've talked a lot here today. I usually, I think we've talked about a lot of interesting games here. So all my thoughts I think are in the video so far. Did you either of you anything that you wanted to wrap up?
I don't know, just like think the concept. I think hidden goals and game goals are really good add-ons to a game. Like I really enjoy. I personally enjoy games that have those elements, that, like not just the final score at the end of the game, but there's some extra little bonus that players can give. I really think that's a good catch-up mechanic for players.
Yeah, and I think I especially enjoy them when it adds character to who I am and what I'm playing and what I'm doing. So I really like when it's like Call to Adventure, where it's like it's what my destiny is, or like Ticket to Ride. It's like I've created an empire of connected trains, or like adding the king card in to meet with my queen in my village. You know, I really like when it sort of characterizes the way that I played the game. So cool.
I like that. Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, well, thanks for chatting about this today.
So, yeah, thank you very much for coming. Really appreciated it. So cool.
Thank you.